I'd like to welcome y'all to the House Public Safety Homeland Security meeting. We're going to move pretty quick this afternoon. We've got several propositions ahead of us. And just for the information of the folks in attendance, we'll probably be acting on 2 of the bills, and probably a couple of them will probably be perfected a little bit further down the road. I think they call it Christmas tree season. First up, this bill was going to probably hold for a day or two. House Bill 270. Mr. Martin. I understand you've got the pressing engagement, as does my counterpart over there. But I understand yours is going to be real quick, because we're just going to go over it, because yours has the possibility of singing "Merry Christmas" sometime in the next 7 or 8 days.
Opportunity to be here. My bill simply would allow police officers from law enforcement agencies that are located outside of the state, when they move to the state of Georgia, it would give them the same the exemption that our current people who retire within the state of Georgia have. That's all it does. It simply cites the federal LAOSA Act, and by doing that, it brings those folks in who retire and reside in Georgia and gives them that exemption status that our in-state officers have. That's SB 270.
Any questions from any of the committee members of the author of the bill? Everybody understands what it does? This may be the last, could possibly be the last time this bill looks like it. We've got a couple of questions. Number 23.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, thank you for bringing this bill. Do they need to register or do anything in the interim, or when they go, that's all they need to do?
There's some idea. There's continuing education and training that's included within our code, but also in the federal code, and then there's also some ID provisions in there that they must maintain as well. They have to be properly identified by the...
Okay, thank you.
Number 26.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. Mr. Chairman, I just had a motion at the appropriate time. I don't have a question.
Well, I don't know that a motion will be in order, because we're going to hold this bill.
Okay, thank you.
In the breast of the chairman's
yes, sir.
discretion. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this bill? Mr. Thomas? Sure. Very good. Anyone else? Senator, we thank you. And
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're going to be working on this, and you're going to be a happy guy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Mr. Chairman? Yes, sir. Come right on up. You've actually got the easiest bill of the whole crowd.
Well, I will be very, very brief, Mr. Chairman, and I want to say thank you for sending some good public safety measures over to the Senate. We look forward to making sure we take those up, and we've sent you a lot of good public safety measures too, Mr. Chairman. We hope y'all see fit to move those on through. But anyway, Senate Bill 279 does one simple thing. It increases the number of post-council members from 20 to 22, and the 2 that we're adding is the Commissioner of the Department of Natural Resources and the Commissioner of the Department of Juvenile Justice. The reason for that is those 2 agencies have law enforcement officers that are post-certified, and those are the only 2 state agencies that are not currently recognized as a member of post-council. And that's what this legislation does, and I'd appreciate your favorable consideration.
The committee may remember this was the same bill that we passed out of this committee earlier, and I believe it was House Bill 720.
730.
730, I'm sorry. This was the one that added Juvenile Justice Commissioner, or designated the post council, and now DNR, which brings all that into. Any questions from any of the committee members? Any comments or questions from the or any comments from the audience? What'd be number 24?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that Senate Bill 279 that we pass this on to the House.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have they're falling all over themselves to make the motion, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate that. They may get some favorable consideration over on our side.
What a great day it is to be. What a great day it is to be a Georgian, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
We have a motion. We second. Do we have any other questions? Any other discussions? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Y'all have a great day.
Appreciate it. Let's see. Senator Thompson, House Senate Bill 263. I guess I'll be carrying the one since I've already passed it out of the House on Mr. Tyler's.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This bill came about. We had a local chief of police in Bartow County that retired after 30-some years, requested to be able to keep his service revolver and his badge, and was denied. He was denied, saying that weapons were provided in the local municipality, probably through state funds and so on. And so all this is permissive to saying the state will not permit that or will not stand in the way of that. So it's aligning with what we do with the state agencies. Mr. Chairman, I'd appreciate favorable consideration for this bill.
Pretty well up and down. Any questions from the committee? No questions from the committee? Anyone wishes to, does anyone wish to address this issue? Do we have anybody from GMA or ACCG? Come on up. I was almost in a state of being shocked that y'all hadn't been here.
Actually, the GMA is neutral on this bill because there's a provision in the bill that gives local authority on whether or not a local government would approve for the weapon and the badge to go to the retiring officer. So because it gives that measure of local control, we're neutral on the bill.
Since it gives y'all control, y'all ought to be in favor of it.
Not quite, because some people still do have some concerns about it, but we've spoken to some members of our membership, and the tone that we're taking right now is we're neutral on the bill.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Well, I guess that we know that's the best we can hope for out of ACCG, and that sounds like a win-win. All right. Any other questions from the committee members? If not, what's the will of the committee? We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second, recognizing number 25.
That was a due pass.
All right. All right. We have a motion. We have a second. Do we have any other questions from any of the committee? Any comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes clearly have it.
Thank you. I appreciate the committee, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You like the promptness of this, don't you?
I do, sir. Appreciate that.
All right. We have two other bills up. Let's call, tell you what, Senator Jones, would you come up, please? To the committee members, you'll see in front of you Senate Bill 141. Now, as a background of this, this is the language that Senator Jones had in this bill last year. That bill was the language that he was looking for last year was included in, I believe, House Bill 475. Is that correct? Rick?
I think it was
475, yes.
Yeah, it was 475. So actually, the original that you see has already been passed. I thought this was a right innovative possibility that since we had already passed this on another bill last year as a Christmas tree, that this bill this code section and all might be worth giving the good senator an opportunity to maybe come forward with another shot or another bite at the apple, so to say, to even perfect the actions a little bit more. And of course, whether you can sell it to the committee or not, and this again, in this stage of the game, this bill could be a lot of other stuff could be added to it. So would you? I think you have 3 different amendments you wanted us to consider or to look at.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right, if you would, let's tell us what you got.
And let me just thank the committee for taking another look at Senate Bill 141. There have been several. I've worked in this area on the original 141, trying to identify areas within our public school system where we could improve some of the processes. And there's one thing that occurred to me from the Senate Study Committee I did 2 years ago related to the number of days that a child can be suspended outside of the school system. And I took a lot of testimony, and right now the code section allows the school system to suspend a child up to 10 days without holding a hearing. And all of the expert testimony that I heard basically said if a child is suspended out of school for more than 5 days, then academically that child never ever gets caught up in their curriculum. One of the amendments that I offer up and this is AM 331617, simply says that a school system cannot suspend a child, and this is out of school suspension, and it changes it from 10 days to 5 days. That's the only thing that this amendment does, and I would certainly hope that the committee would look upon it very favorably. The other two amendments that I offer up are some areas that we've discussed over in the Senate side. Again, the other two I just simply offer up for discussion purposes. AM 331616 is already in the Governor's Bill 367. That bill includes some language in the Governor's Bill for criminal justice reform on some minimum requirements for disciplinary panels in school systems. So this language has essentially already been taken care of in Senate Bill 367 and the criminal justice reform. That is AM 1616. Right. The other amendment that I offer up is AM 1615. This is a kind of a late arriving amendment. It was brought to my attention by Georgia Legal Services that provide pro bono services for children on their appeals. And it was mentioned to me that it would be really, really nice if a child would be informed during the school disciplinary hearing process that an attorney can be made available to them. Again, these are children that can't afford to have representation at these hearings, but that legal assistance may be available at no cost. And the only thing that this simply does is just instructs the school system to notify a child that those services are available. That's the only thing that it does. I would ask this committee to look favorably upon AM 1617, AM 331617, and AM 331615.
All right. Do we have any questions of the committee? All right. Number 15.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, just a question here. Oftentimes the districts use retired educators, retired central office personnel to bring back to sit on these tribunals. I don't see anything in this particular language that would allow that. Is it in the law already, or are we changing it? Would they be able to sit on the tribunal, I guess is my question.
Is that AM 1616?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
1616, this language has already been addressed in Senate Bill 367, the Governor's Criminal Justice Reform Bill. They put some minimal requirements in that language. I recall it being Section 2, not to be exact. But there's some language in the Governor's Bill, Senate Bill 367, that addresses some minimal requirements for hearing officers that all of the stakeholders have agreed to. So I'm not even asking consideration for AM 331616. It's already in the Governor's Bill.
Thank you.
Ms. Frazier.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Jones, in regard to AM 331616 amendment, you state that the current policy, well, that's my question probably, is what is the current policy in place now for a student that possesses a firearm and expulsion from school, the period of expulsion, because you're requesting that it's less than a year. So currently, what is it? Or is that policy based upon local school boards?
Are you referring to 1616?
1616, line 22 through 27.
Details on this.
That language is, again, untouched, but I'm withdrawing AM 1616.
You were, okay, you were
Yeah,
drawing
the
it.
whole thrust behind 1616 was to address the disciplinary and the tribunals that hear these cases. The governor's already done that in Senate Bill 367.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Let's see, 26.
Mr. Chairman. Good. Thanks, Senator. Just on 1615, on like 21, just making sure, all the code sections, how to read them and all, but this is going to be given to the parents or party of the guardian, I guess, at expulsion prior to hearing.
It should be given prior to the hearing, and a child right now already has a right to an attorney if they choose to have one at the hearing.
Okay.
Too many of our children in this great state unaware that they can, and unfortunately, their outcomes could have been different had they been represented by this service, which is pro bono, the children who can't afford to hire their own private attorney.
Mr. Chairman, if I continue, Senator, on the area, I just wonder, just chasing rabbits as we do in these code sections.
Sure.
If you're up where I'm at in rural North Georgia, you don't have, that I know of, a legal aid group. And so what's your idea on what's the area that, if you're in rural South Georgia, there might be one legal aid 100 miles away? Or, I mean, just how are you going to define, just as we're discussing this, what that area is? I mean, I know in Jonesboro you've got one, but I'm sure, but across the state, the area is going to be one of those hard, we open school systems up for an issue if they don't reach big enough an area. You know what I'm saying?
Every child in every school system in every part of this state has the right to have an attorney represent them at a hearing. The only thing that this does is simply says to those children who can't afford one, there is a service provided pro bono. Georgia Legal Services have offices all over the state. We fund them, by the way, with our tax dollars. So they do operate in all areas of this great state.
So they have a good coverage. So I don't know.
That is correct.
And are there others besides Georgia Legal Services that do this sort of thing?
There are others in the metropolitan area. I am not familiar. Atlanta Legal Aid is one in this area.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with those in the northern or the southern sectors of the state. What free agencies are available to
Yes, sir.
children.
Mr. Chair, my question sort of is, maybe one of our good attorneys can answer this, is what if a school system doesn't list them all, or they make a mistake in listing them? How does that play out in something like this? That's just my curiosity question.
All right. Let me make a suggestion in the essence of time. As I'd explained before, that the guts of this bill has already been passed, but I thought that I have enough concerns about school systems that are basically booting our kids out of school for minor infractions. And once you kick a kid out of school, whatever it is, there's a repercussion on that kid.
Absolutely.
And there needs to be some sort of, maybe just to look at it. But Senator, if you would, I'd like to appoint some of the members of this committee to work with you over the next few days, maybe to come together with some things that might be beneficial. Representative Clark, would you be interested?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Glanton? Ms. Jaspers, would you serve? Ms. Taylor, would you have an opportunity? And would you work with the senator on these and come up with some language, something uniform that, and y'all know the feel of the committee, and I think that y'all know what we could maybe come through. Senator?
I would appreciate that, Mr. Chairman.
Would anyone else like to make a comment? Yes, sir, Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me again. Article 27 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated was one of those specific articles that was superseded based on the irreconcilable conflict between House Bill 826 and 60 when that happened. So I would ask that if, I didn't have an opportunity to read his bill as it's presented to the committee because the clerk wasn't able to give it to me in the format that's presented to you. But under the specific statute that requires or delineates reporting requirements for schools, I would ask that the reporting requirements be removed as for colleges and universities, just only listed for public schools for children. Because that article, you read the whole article, that whole article is nothing but children under 18 in elementary or secondary schools. But that one particular code section says for college. And just for purposes of consistency, if that one code section was amended to delete any reference to dean or college, that way when a person reads the whole article, if it were to pass into law, it would always be public school and public school principal for children less than 18, and there wouldn't be any overreach into colleges since it's about children being removed from school. That has nothing to do with adults.
Very good. All right. Committee, y'all will take heed to that. And anyone else wish to make a comment on this? If not, Senator, thank you for taking
Mr.
time.
Chairman, thank you, members of the committee.
Hopefully something can come out to add to a little bit more scrutiny. We thank you. My good friend, Chairman
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be before you and the members of your committee this afternoon with Senate Bill 416. Let me give you just a brief overview of what this involves, and I'll give a little history so you can know where this idea came from. Back in when we had 9/11, Roy Barnes was the governor, and I think everybody in the country was pretty shook up by, that's one of the first times other than Pearl Harbor we ever had an attack on our country. And various states began to look and see what can we do to protect against or defend against these type of attacks in the future. And Roy Barnes came up with the idea to create a collaborative effort between our local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies to assess threats, respond to them, react to them, and coordinate the activities at all those different levels. He did this through an executive order that created what's referenced as GSAC, and that's an acronym for the Georgia Information Sharing and Analysis Center. So it turns out we were one of the first 4 states in the country to do that, and soon after all 50 states have established these type of centers. They're colloquially referred to as fusion centers because you're fusing local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies and emergency management agencies to react to different types of criminal threats and specifically terrorist activities. That executive order was subsequently renewed by Sonny Perdue back in 2003 and has again been renewed by Governor Deal. I don't know the date. I think it was 2011 when he has renewed it. So we have been operating a fusion center like all other states for many years now. And it is largely funded by federal funding and must follow federal requirements on what they do and how they operate, who is responsible for reporting. Each state is required to have a director of Homeland Security that has security clearances to deal with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Homeland Security Department, Federal Homeland Security Department. What this bill does is I began thinking this fall as the San Bernardino attacks occurred that this is really a very real threat to our country, that we are under attack and there are going to be repeated attempted terroristic attacks on this country, and I wanted to make sure that Georgia was prepared for that and would be able to respond and react appropriately to protect our citizens. In the course of it, I was actually very relieved to find out what we're doing, that we already had this fusion center in operation, and we're making certain in the budget to give enough funding for the necessary number of analysts and equipment to respond to these type of threats. I've worked with the governor's office in preparing this legislation, and there are 2 key provisions here, and they're sections 5 and 6 that codify basically what we have been doing via executive order for many, many years now. And Section 5 actually deals with GSAC, and Chapter 6, or Section 6, deals with GEMA, which is Jim Butterworth, the governor, has designated to be our Director of Homeland Security and Georgia Emergency Management Agency. So that's the guts of this bill, or there on pages 3 through 5, sections 5 and 6. The remainder of this bill, sections 1 through 4 and 7 through 11, are nothing other than renaming GEMA. And this is at the request of the administration, and it changes that name to Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency. All we're doing is adding Homeland Security Agency to it, because in our state, the same individual, Jim Butterworth, at this time General Butterworth, is filling both roles, and the governor believes that it's best going forward that there be one individual handling both of those roles. So we're renaming the agency from GEMA to Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency. So that's all this is doing in all these other sections of the bill. Everywhere in the code where we reference GEMA, we're just changing that to add and Homeland Security Agency. So I'll focus my comments, and I can be very brief here, just on starting at the bottom of page 3 of this committee substitute in Section 5. And the reason this is done via a committee substitute is that the governor's office didn't come to me until we had already passed our bill out of committee, and it was ready for the Senate floor. We have rules that any amendment that is longer than 50% of the length of the bill makes it a floor substitute, has to go back to Rules Committee, come back to the floor. We didn't have time to do that before day 30. It wouldn't have gotten over by crossover day. So that's the only reason I didn't have this in to begin with, and I think it works now. But if you look at Section 5, we start with definitions, and it of course defines the GSAC, Georgia Information Sharing and Analysis Center, and then you'll see it defined that as the fusion center. It's the same thing, just one's a colloquial term, and it tells you what we're doing there up at the top. That we're combining the resources of various agencies of state and local governments to try to maximize our ability to both detect, prevent, and respond to criminal activities, and specifically Homeland Security activities. Below that, we define Homeland Security activities as being terrorist attacks, a hostile military or paramilitary action, or an extraordinary law enforcement emergency. So it could be something broader than just a terrorist attack, and this is a collaborative effort, and we lay it out here what to do. The director of GSAC will be the director of the GBI, Vernon Keenan. He is currently serving in that role, and this codifies it so that that individual will continue. Our chief law enforcement officer will be in charge of running this collaborative effort, the Fusion Center. And their job is just to collect, analyze data, determine any threats to our state, our citizens. And I mean, we're talking about things that are not just a terrorist attack. I mean, we could be dealing with a violent attack like San Bernardino. It could be an attack on our power grid that could shut down our power system. It could be an attack on our water supply. It could be a biological attack or health threats, or of course it could be cyber terrorism. All of those type of areas could be responded to and should be monitored by GSAC. I have on page 5 there, you'll see at line 134 and 5 is the section that defines who will be a member of this GSAC Center, the Fusion Center. It'll be the director of the GBI is who that's referring to, and also our Director of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, which is the newly named GEMA, the Commissioner of Public Safety, Commissioner of Natural Resources, the Commissioner of Corrections, our State Fire Marshal, the Attorney General, and the Adjutant General of the National Guard, as well as state and local fire and law enforcement facilities as determined by our Homeland Security Director. So this just sets forth, that by the way is who is currently serving in GSAC, and we're simply codifying these so that this will extend beyond any specific administration. It will become part of our structure going forward. We've got it right, and I want to make sure that future administrations are obligated to continue this very beneficial effort. You will also notice that that little section B on 144 gives our Director of Homeland Security the ability to have his own analyst in GSAC. So there will be analysts there, but also our Director of Homeland Security. That is important because the federal guidelines are we must have a Director of Homeland Security that has security clearances and can interact directly with the FBI and the Federal Department of Homeland Security. They require this before they fund these centers. So it's a collaborative effort that sets it out. And if you continue here at the bottom of page 5, this is also required by federal rules and regulations for a fusion center. It sets out the Director of Homeland Security for each state, what their jobs will be, what their duties are, and it just lays those out all the way through page 6. So, Mr. Chairman, I encourage the committee to assist me in us codify our current fusion center. This is in accordance with what's currently practiced, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Number 23.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing this bill. I think it is something that needs to be codified. I had a question, and it may be that it's included in the emergency management, but is there any allocation space or information provided to the medical community and to the CDC? Do they need to be included in this, or is it, maybe I'm just not seeing it here written, but it is part of the emergency management?
That is a federal agency, so I wasn't able to build that in through our state statute. I do believe that they do coordinate, and Homeland Security coordinates with our CDC. I think it would be a good idea for them to have a representative involved in GSAC, and I would suspect that our Director of Homeland Security would have that flexibility by his appointment process if he believes that it's necessary.
Thank you, because that is a concern. Thank you.
I agree, and that also makes us a target here in Atlanta, having CDC, but they're a great resource for us to the extent we ever have to deal with any kind of health threats or biological warfare.
Thank you.
Number 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, you said that this is mainly codifying most of this. Does this have any impact on our budget?
This does not, as drafted, it doesn't change anything. We do fund portions of this.
Right, we do.
Most of it is federal flow-through funds that we have to have these type of provisions either through an executive order or through code to comply with federal rules in order to receive those federal funds. Now, there are GBI agents and analysts and investigators attached to GSAC that we pay for through state funds, and this will also enable there to be Director of Homeland Security, state GMA employees, analysts be involved as well. In this year's budget, the version that just passed the House has added 2 new analysts under the GBI,
right,
and 2 new analysts under GMA. And it's also added new investigators and new GBI agents. They monitor threats other than terrorism as well. I mean, they're looking at child sex trafficking, motorcycle gangs, all kind of different areas of crime that's been designated to the GBI. So, and the final thing would be there's a provision in the budget, the bond package, to do some design work to build a separate facility for our GSAC in the future going forward. They need to be co-located with federal agencies, and it'll require some funding to do, but not near as much as you would think. And we're talking about just a few $1 million out of a $23 billion budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Number 27.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for bringing this. Just extremely minor thing. If you help me clarify it, I was looking to try to see where the Director of a GBI was specifically spelled out. I didn't see it under the definition section. I was assuming as I was reading the bill last night that the director meant the director of the GBI, but I wasn't sure. Just throw that out to you. I don't know if it should be more clearly defined or not.
It's there.
Okay.
It's in areas of code not affected by this.
I thought that was probably the case.
I had the same issue. I was asked a question on the floor of the Senate, which director was I talking about, GEMA or GBI? But you will notice Section 5 is referencing Chapter 3 of Title 35, which relates to Georgia Bureau of Investigation. So anywhere under there where they're talking about director, that is Vernon Keenan.
I assume that was the case. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you very much.
Great question. I had the same question as I was working this through.
Representative Frazier.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. My question is, will there be any displacements of employees, and is this, John Butterworth will still be in charge of this GSAC?
Thank you for your question. There will be no displacement of employees or interference with that whatsoever, and it's actually the director of the GBI that will be in charge of the Fusion Center.
GBI.
But there are certain roles that the Director of Homeland Security, which is General Butterworth, is required to fulfill in that center. He will be a member of the GSAC team, let's call it.
And that's GISAC.
That's right. Georgia Information Sharing Analysis Center.
Okay. Thank you.
It works fantastic. I mean, there is great, I've heard anecdotal stories of how Homeland Security will alert our state of threats that they become aware of, and we immediately are able to then convey it to local area law enforcement to react to and respond to threats. There have been a number of threats that have been nipped in the bud, so to speak, as Barney Fife would say. And also, you know, if we have a disaster of some sort or an attack, they work together to respond to it. They have this communication going full time so that we're geared up, we're keyed up to react if anything happens in the future.
All right. Mr. Holcomb, is this you?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of my questions I think was answered, which was the structure of it. I understand that one of the ideas is to have a place where people can come and coordinate and share information, and the director of GBI would be effectively the person that would run the meetings and the interagency coordination.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. What level of clearances do most of the people have within this? Are most of the communications at the top secret level or the secret level, or can you give us some context of?
Most are at the secret level.
Okay.
And each state's Director of Homeland Security has to have that security clearance to be in the loop on these things, and General Butterworth has that clearance. And I can't tell you for sure whether it's just secret or top secret. I don't know, but it's to the level needed to have the information shared with them about any kind of threats. I know Director Keenan has been very candid with me and wanted to reassure me that as far as any collection of, we'll just say, intelligence or data, nothing is being done that would require a warrant, search warrant, that they don't get a search warrant for. So he wanted to alleviate any fears that there may be some mega data gathering or whatever that was in any way unconstitutional or unwarranted. Any of the intelligence collection that our state people do, they will get the necessary warrants to access that data or information. And of course, as you know, just in the sort of the division of powers between federal and state governments, the FBI is worried about domestic threats, and they would be getting any search warrants they needed to authorize any intelligence gathering they do. And of course, the CIA or Homeland Security would be worrying about external threats and have the authority to do that. So we wouldn't be crossing those borders, but we have to share that information, or else it's what's the point of gathering it if you can't coordinate and share it amongst each other. So long-winded answer to the necessary clearances are in place mostly through the GEMA, now GMAN, Homeland Security Director, end of things.
Okay, thank you. And that's consistent with what my expectation would be, because just the levels of restrictions for top secret are pretty dramatic and different from secret. And my last question is, in terms of lines 108 and 109, I don't know if that mission would be better described as an anti-terrorism analytical component instead of a terrorism analytical component. It's not a huge difference, but just I don't know if the goal is really to try to prevent terrorism or if it's both to prevent and to respond to incidents in the event that they were to occur.
I don't know, Representative. I was very careful not to change any words. Well, I was literally just transcribing the executive orders and the federal guidelines into this, and I don't know if they're terms of art or not, but I wasn't going to be the guy to mess it up. So I would urge caution. If you may be able to perfect this in many ways, but we probably should make sure that you clear that through GEMA and the governor's office to make certain that you're not suddenly taking us out of compliance with the federal guidelines and losing our funding.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Senator, I'm very grateful for your work on this bill. You and I have talked, and this is for the ears of the committee members. In my discussions with Senator Calvert, there was one major component I wanted to be sure of, and that is that the center itself, that it remained under direct control and authority of a law enforcement agency. That would be the GBI. That looks similar, but as it said, that we need to be absolutely sure when we scrutinize this bill. Mr. Hitchens, comment.
Well, as the first director of the Georgia Office of Homeland Security, I can add a little bit, but the reason it hadn't been codified to this point is exactly what the chairman says, is that some of the people, when I departed for the Department of Public Safety, my replacement came from GEMA, and he had no law enforcement experience, and therefore they just kept up the executive order, and Director Keenan was in place then too, and the young man back here with the GBI was the deputy director of DSAC back then. But to answer another question that was asked, the director of Georgia Department of Public Health is on that committee too, who responds to all the biological issues that arise, and it is also most of them have top secret clearances. People who've been in the military, or people who get the clearances after they're selected to be participants in GSAC. But it's both for prevention and for response. And we were one of the 4 first states in the country, and Cello has traveled all around the country selling the fusion system to other people, and it's called, I think every state has a fusion center now. But I appreciate it being codified, but our caution always was that we were going to have a law enforcement presence there and somebody that understood search and seizure and Title IV.
To alleviate the fears of both the chairman and you, Colonel, on line 111 is very clear. Now, this is under the GBI Code, Section 35.3. Responsibility for development, maintenance, and operations of the center is vested in the director. That's referencing the director of the GBI, as you and I, Mr. Chairman, had discussed, that we wanted to make sure we kept it that way. That's one reason I like the idea of codifying it, so that future governors can't just on a whim change that to one of their most trusted advisors, because it needs to be law enforcement to run this. This is a law enforcement function.
Good. Any other questions of the committee at this time? We've got a couple of folks that wanted to be heard. Mr. Norris?
Just very quickly, Mr. Chairman, I'm not here to oppose the bill. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. This has been really a godsend throughout the many years. There's been so much information brought in, synthesized, interpreted, and put back out throughout the state. And thank you for that. And I think codification is a good thing with due diligence. I am concerned with one thing. You all know who I work with. I work with the sheriffs. And there are, I'm looking at an old version, there are a couple of paragraphs in here that talk about implying where the state will actually come in and take control of a law enforcement situation. Now, we don't have a state police in our state. We have the GBI with a limited jurisdiction. We have the Georgia State Patrol with a limited jurisdiction. We have DNR and other support agencies that we live by. We need them. But there's not a lot of original jurisdiction and authority, for instance, with the GBI. There's certain areas that the GBI, and we like the GBI, we need the GBI, can perform in. But this is the, as I read this first version, I think, Senator Calvert, it reminds me of what the sheriffs have told me for the 20 years I've been here. It has nothing to do with intelligence or really a law enforcement. It has something to do with what happens after a natural disaster. We had the floods. We've had tornadoes. We have our friends, our supporters from the state that come in and help. Well, they come in and help and they do what they're told to do, and sometimes they leave and it is the sheriff, nobody else, that's left there to deal with the public in the aftermath and sometimes what state officers may have done or not done. So I guess I want to bring forward this. If there's anything in the current language or the language that you're looking at now that's going to imply that the state can come in and tell the sheriff or the chief, I guess, what they're going to do on a law enforcement operation, I think we're going to need to talk about that. And Representative Hitchens might be able to make me feel comfortable about that. Senator Calvert, we're for the bill, but I just want to be particularly careful. These people that I work with are elected, and they're elected, and they come and go every 4 years, and I want their job performance to represent what they want to do on the job and not necessarily what someone else feels is appropriate in a law enforcement situation. So with that, I will hush, but thank you for listening.
Thank you, Terry. Any questions of the committee of Terry? Thank you. Mr. Weaver, did you wish to be heard on this? Mr. Weaver? Apparently not. All right. I'm very fortunate as being a chairman of such a talented committee. Out of an abundance of precaution, so we can look through and scrutinize everything, Mr. Leader.
Yes, sir.
I've got such good committee members. I'm going to ask Colonel Hitchens, Mr. Lunston, Mr. Atwood. Of course, you were federal. I don't know if we want you involved in this. Would you three gentlemen work with me and the author of this bill? And let's go through this thing pretty good over the next couple of days. And Senator, you'd be available just as quick as we can get everything worked out on this where we move forward with this.
You just let me know, Mr. Chairman, and I have a little file of resource materials, including the federal guidelines for Fusion Center. I'm more than happy to share would make your guys' job easier. Just call on me as you need me, and I'll give you my sort of backup research on this and help you any way I can.
Listen, we really do appreciate the hard work you've done on this.
Thank you. Appreciate you
members of the committee, we've got a couple of different folks, different groups that's got some work ahead of them. The group that will be working with Senator Manuel Jones, and then this group. If there's anything else anyone wishes to be heard, if not, thank y'all for being here.